Try this right now. Lie back, close your eyes, and reach your arms slowly above your head until you feel your spine lengthen. Hold it for 10 seconds. Now, notice not your muscles, your breath. It's slowed down without you telling it to. Your shoulders, which have been hiked up near your ears since approximately 9 a.m., just dropped 2 inches. You didn't relax them. The stretch did. That's not a coincidence, and it's not just stretching. It's a switch being thrown. Somewhere underneath your skin right now is a network most people have never been taught to think about. Not your muscles, but the tissue wrapped around them, threading through every layer of your body like a spiderweb cast over your entire skeleton. It's called fascia, and it is not packaging. It is wired with nerve endings, and those nerve endings are in constant silent conversation with your brainstem. Here's what almost nobody realizes. Your nervous system doesn't read your day in thoughts. It reads it in tension. The tightness sitting in your shoulders from 8 hours at a desk, the compression that settled into your lower back from standing, the shallow, clipped breathing you've been doing without noticing. None of that disappears just because you turn off the lights and close your eyes. Your brain is still getting signals that say stay alert. And as long as those signals keep arriving, no amount of willing yourself to sleep is going to work. This is the part most sleep advice skips entirely. We treat sleep like a mental event, something you talk yourself into, something a pill can force. But your body has its own veto power, and it doesn't negotiate with your intentions. It responds to mechanics, to pressure, to stretch. So when you slowly extend a muscle and hold it, you're not loosening up in some vague wellness sense. You are mechanically deforming the fascia surrounding that muscle, and those nerve endings inside it are firing a very specific message up through your spinal cord and into your brainstem. The tissue is being stretched gently, under control, with no resistance. And your nervous system has a built-in interpretation for that exact signal. It means we are not in danger, not fighting, not fleeing, safe enough to power down. That's the moment everything shifts. Your heart rate, which has been quietly elevated by the residual stress of your day, starts to drop. Your breathing, the same breath that sped up when you were stuck in traffic or answering one more email, lengthens on its own. None of this is willpower. It's a chemical and electrical cascade triggered entirely by what's happening in your tissue. Stretching before bed, then, isn't really about flexibility at all. It's a physical key turning a biological lock. And once you understand which lock it's turning, you'll never think about winding down the same way again. Think about what gravity has been doing to you since the moment you got out of bed this morning. It hasn't stopped, not for 1 second. Every hour you've spent upright, walking to the kitchen, sitting at a desk, standing in line, hunching over a phone, has been a quiet negotiation between your skeleton and the downward pull of the planet. And your body, being efficient rather than graceful, doesn't fight that pull with poise. It fights it with compression. Your spine shortens ever so slightly as the discs between your vertebrae get squeezed by the weight stacked above them. Your shoulders, especially if you've spent the day reaching toward a keyboard or a steering wheel, drift forward and roll inward, because that's the shape your arms naturally pull your upper back into when they're extended for hours at a time. Your hip flexors, the muscles at the front of your hips, spend the day in a shortened, contracted position if you've been sitting, and they don't simply spring back the moment you stand up. They stay short. They remember the chair. None of this happens because something is wrong with you. It happens because this is what bodies do when they're left in one position under constant gravitational load for the better part of 16 waking hours. Think of it like a coiled spring being slowly wound tighter and tighter throughout the day, except nobody ever winds it back the other way. You don't notice it accumulating because it happens gradually. A millimeter of compression here, a degree of rounding there. But by the time you're lying in bed at night, your body isn't neutral. It's loaded. It's holding a physical record of every hour you spent fighting gravity without ever consciously releasing the tension that fight required. This is what we can call the mechanical residual, the leftover physical tension that doesn't disappear just because the activity that caused it has ended. You stop typing, but your forearms stay tight. You stop driving, but your neck stays braced. You lie down, but your lower back doesn't fully release because it spent all day compensating for a pelvis that's been tilted forward from sitting. Your body is still, in a very literal sense, holding the shape of your day. And here's the part that matters most. Your brain doesn't know the difference between I'm still standing at my desk and I'm lying in bed, but my muscles are still braced as if I were. It only knows what your tissue is telling it, and right now your tissue is telling it to stay on guard. That bracing has a name, and it's not just tightness, it's tone. Muscle tone is the baseline level of tension your muscles hold, even when you're not actively using them. The resting hum of low-level contraction that keeps you upright and ready to move at a moment's notice. A small amount of tone is normal and necessary, but when your tone stays elevated late into the evening, when your shoulders are still braced, your jaw is still clenched, your fists are still slightly curled even as you try to drift off, your nervous system reads that as a request. Not a request you're making on purpose, a request your body is making on your behalf, whether you intend it or not. And the request it's reading is simple: stay alert. This is where the sympathetic nervous system enters the picture, the branch of your nervous system responsible for the fight or flight response, the one that floods your body with readiness when there's a threat to respond to. Most people think this system only switches on during obvious emergencies, a near miss in traffic, a confrontation, a sudden loud noise. But the sympathetic nervous system doesn't actually require a dramatic trigger. It responds to ongoing physical signals just as readily as it responds to acute danger. An elevated muscle tone is exactly that kind of signal. High tone tells your nervous system that your body is still in a state of readiness, still prepared to act, still bracing against something, even if that something is nothing more than the accumulated tension of a normal Tuesday. So, even as you lie motionless in the dark, willing yourself to relax, a part of your nervous system is still quietly running the program it's been running all day. Stay tight, stay ready, stay alert. And that program does not care that you're tired, it only cares about what your muscles are reporting. This is why so many people experience that maddening sensation of being exhausted and wired at the same time. The mind foggy with fatigue, but the body humming with a low, persistent restlessness that won't let go. It's not a contradiction, it's two different systems giving two different reports. Your mind is exhausted because it's been working all day, but your body hasn't received the signal that it's safe to stand down because nothing has happened to deliver that signal. You haven't told your nervous system in a language it actually understands that the day's demands are over. And the language your nervous system understands isn't words, it's mechanics. To understand how that language works, you have to know about something most of us were never taught about in school, despite it wrapping around literally every structure inside us. It's called fascia. And it's not muscle, and it's not skin. It's a separate, continuous web of connective tissue that surrounds every muscle, every organ, every nerve, and every blood vessel in your body, linking them all into one unbroken, three-dimensional network. If you could strip away everything else and leave only the fascia behind, you'd still see the rough shape of a human body because fascia touches everything. It's the reason a pull in your calf can sometimes be felt as tightness in your lower back, and the reason tension in your jaw can echo all the way down into your shoulders. It's not separate systems acting independently, it's one continuous fabric, and a tug anywhere on that fabric travels. For a long time, fascia was treated by science as little more than packing material, the biological equivalent of bubble wrap, there to hold things in place and not much else. That assumption turned out to be almost entirely wrong. Fascia is now understood to be one of the most densely innervated tissues in the entire body, meaning it's packed with nerve endings, arguably more densely than muscle itself. It's not passive wrapping, it's a sensory organ in its own right, constantly gathering information about pressure, stretch, and position, and feeding that information directly back to your brain and spinal cord. In a very real sense, your fascia is a map, a living, electrically active map of your body's physical state, updated in real time, that your brain consults constantly to understand what kind of mode your body should be operating in. This is the missing piece in how most people think about stretching. We tend to imagine that stretching only affects the muscle being lengthened, that if you stretch your hamstring, the conversation is happening between you and your hamstring, full stop. But because fascia is continuous and densely wired with nerve endings, stretching one area sends ripples of sensory information through the connected web, And that information arrives at your brain not as the hamstring is longer now, but as something closer to a status report on the safety and readiness of your entire physical structure. Your brain isn't measuring inches, it's listening to a conversation conducted entirely in tension and release. And the way that conversation actually gets translated into something your nervous system can act on comes down to a specific category of nerve ending embedded throughout your fascia and muscle tissue called mechanoreceptors. These are specialized sensors whose entire job is to detect mechanical change, stretch, pressure, compression, and convert that physical information into an electrical signal your nervous system can interpret. They're the reason you can tell with your eyes closed whether your arm is bent or straight. The reason you know where your feet are without looking down. But beyond simple positional awareness, certain mechanoreceptors play a much more interesting role. They help determine whether your nervous system interprets a given sensation as threatening or safe. When a muscle and the fascia around it are stretched slowly, gently, and without sudden force, the mechanoreceptors inside that tissue fire in a steady, controlled pattern. That pattern is essentially a sentence your body is speaking to your brain, and the sentence reads something like, "This tissue is being lengthened deliberately. There is no resistance, there is no danger, you can stand down." Compare that to what happens when a muscle is suddenly overstretched or strained or injured, a fast, uncontrolled signal that reads instead as alarm, prompting a reflexive contraction meant to protect the tissue from damage. The nervous system has learned over the entire span of human evolution to tell these two situations apart almost instantly, because the difference between them is, quite literally, the difference between safety and threat. This is why the speed and quality of a stretch matters so much more than people realize. A slow, sustained stretch, the kind where you ease into a position and simply breathe and hold, produces exactly the kind of steady mechanoreceptor signal your nervous system reads as safe. You're not forcing your body to relax through sheer willpower. You're handing it concrete physical evidence, gathered directly from the tissue itself, that there is nothing left to brace against. The mechanoreceptors aren't speaking in metaphor. They're reporting facts about pressure and length, and your nervous system, hearing those facts arrive in a calm, sustained pattern, draws its own conclusion. It's safe to release the alarm. That release, once it begins, doesn't stay confined to the muscle being stretched. It triggers a cascade that moves outward from the mechanical into the chemical. Throughout the day, your body has been producing cortisol, the hormone most associated with stress and vigilance, released by your adrenal glands whenever your nervous system perceives demand, whether that demand comes from a genuine crisis or from nothing more dramatic than a long commute and a packed inbox. Cortisol is useful in the short term. It sharpens focus, mobilizes energy, keeps you alert and capable of responding to whatever the day throws at you. But cortisol that stays elevated into the evening becomes a problem because it directly interferes with your ability to settle into sleep. It keeps your heart rate slightly higher than it needs to be, your mind slightly more reactive, your body slightly more primed for action, even when there's nothing left to act on. Here's where the mechanical and the chemical finally meet. When your mechanoreceptors send their slow, steady signals of safety up through your nervous system, the response isn't purely electrical. It triggers a corresponding hormonal shift, a gradual reduction in the production of cortisol, paired with an increase in activity along the parasympathetic pathways responsible for rest, digestion, and repair. Your body isn't just feeling calmer in some abstract sense. It's chemically becoming calmer because the physical evidence of safety you provided through stretching has been translated, almost in real time, into a different hormonal environment. This is the quiet, unglamorous miracle hiding inside something as simple as a 5-minute stretch before bed. It's not a trick, and it's not a wellness platitude. It's a direct physical conversation between your tissue and your brain, conducted in the language of tension and release, that ends with your body being handed concrete, undeniable proof that the day's demands are finished and that it's finally chemically safe to let go. There's one more piece of this puzzle, and it's been sitting right in front of you this entire time, hiding in something you do 20,000 times a day without ever paying attention to it: your breathing. Most people think of breath and posture as two separate things. One is something your lungs handle automatically. The other is just how you happen to be sitting or standing. But your diaphragm, the dome-shaped muscle responsible for the majority of your breathing, doesn't operate in isolation. It sits directly beneath your ribcage, attached to your spine, and its ability to move fully and freely depends almost entirely on the position of the structure around it. When you've spent the day hunched forward, shoulders rounded, ribcage compressed, spine curved into the shape a desk chair slowly carves into all of us, your diaphragm physically doesn't have the room it needs to descend properly with each breath. So it doesn't. It takes a smaller bite of air than it's capable of taking dozens of times a minute, and you compensate without ever noticing by breathing a little faster and a little shallower, pulling air mostly into the upper chest instead of the lower belly. This is shallow breathing, and by evening, it's not an occasional pattern. It's become the default. Now think about what happens the moment you stretch your arms overhead or arch gently backward, or open your chest in a slow forward fold. You're not just lengthening a muscle, you're physically restoring the space your diaphragm has been missing all day. The ribcage lifts and expands. The spine decompresses out of its hunched position, and almost instantly, without any conscious instruction from you, your breath changes shape. It drops lower, it slows down, it deepens. This isn't willpower or meditation technique, it's simple mechanics. You've given your diaphragm room to move, and it moves further, which means each breath pulls in more air with less effort, which means your breathing rate naturally drops because your body no longer needs to compensate for restricted space with rapid shallow breaths. This matters far more than it might seem because your breathing rate isn't just a symptom of your nervous system's state. It's also a direct input into it. Your brain is constantly monitoring the rhythm of your breath as one of its primary sources of information about whether your body is under threat or at ease. Fast, shallow breathing is the pattern associated with stress, exertion, and danger. Slow, deep breathing is the pattern associated with safety and rest. So, when posture-based stretching mechanically forces your breath to slow down, you're not just feeling calmer as a side effect. You're sending your nervous system one more concrete signal, alongside the steady mechanoreceptor reports already arriving from your fascia that everything is fine, that there's no reason to stay braced, that it's safe to stand down. And there's a specific structure inside your body responsible for translating that slower breath into an actual physical change in your heart rate, your digestion, and your overall state of alertness. It's called the vagus nerve, and it might be the single most important piece of anatomy nobody ever teaches you about. The vagus nerve runs from your brainstem down through your neck and chest, branching out to touch your heart, your lungs, and your digestive organs along the way. And it serves as the primary highway for your parasympathetic nervous system, the rest and digest counterpart to the fight-or-flight sympathetic system that's been keeping you wired all day. When the vagus nerve is active, it acts almost like a brake pedal for your heart, slowing your heart rate down and signaling to your entire body that it's safe to shift out of high alert and into recovery. Here's the elegant part. The vagus nerve doesn't just respond to your emotional state. It responds directly to the mechanics of slow, deep breathing, particularly breathing where the exhale is long and unhurried. Every time you take a slow breath that fully engages your diaphragm, especially one with an extended exhale, you're physically stimulating the vagus nerve, and that stimulation has an almost immediate effect on your heart rate. This is why a deep, sustained stretch, held while you breathe slowly, doesn't just feel relaxing in some vague, subjective way. It's mechanically pulling a lever your body uses specifically to apply the brakes. You stretch, your ribcage opens, your breath deepens and slows, your vagus nerve activates, and your heart rate drops. A chain reaction that starts with something as simple as reaching your arms overhead and ends with a measurable shift in your cardiovascular state. This is also why the way you stretch matters just as much as whether you stretch at all. There's a common assumption that more intensity must mean more benefit, that if a gentle stretch feels good, a deeper, more aggressive one must feel even better or work even faster. When it comes to preparing your body for sleep, this assumption works directly against you. A stretch pushed to the point of real discomfort or pain triggers an entirely different response in your nervous system than a gentle one does. Instead of the slow, steady mechanoreceptor signals that communicate safety, an intense or painful stretch fires a sharper, more urgent signal. The same kind of signal your body uses to detect potential injury. That signal doesn't ask your sympathetic nervous system to power down. It does the opposite. It puts your body on alert, because pain is one of the oldest and most reliable triggers your nervous system has for staying braced and ready to react. This means that when your goal is rest rather than performance, intensity actually works against the exact mechanism you're trying to activate. A gentle stretch held for a longer duration, somewhere in the range of 20 to 30 seconds, breathing slowly, the entire time gives your mechanoreceptors enough time to register the position as safe, and gives your diaphragm enough time to settle into that slower, deeper breathing pattern. A sharp, aggressive stretch held for only a few seconds before you flinch out of it never gets the chance to send that signal at all. It's the efficiency of a calm, sustained hold, not the intensity of a deep, forceful one, that actually produces the physiological shift you're after. This is in many ways the opposite of how most people approach exercise and flexibility, where pushing harder and going deeper is usually the goal. Before bed, the goal isn't to test your limits. It's to gently prove to your nervous system, again and again, that there's nothing left to defend against. Once you understand this, the entire practice of stretching before bed stops looking like a flexibility exercise and starts looking like something closer to a ritual. A deliberate, repeatable signal that you give your body every single night to mark the transition from one state into another. Think about what a hot shower does for you on a purely habitual level. You don't take it because you're scientifically calculating water temperature's effect on your skin's blood vessels. You take it because, somewhere along the way, your body learned to associate that specific sequence of actions with the end of the day, and that learned association itself becomes part of the signal. Bedtime stretching can occupy that exact same role, except instead of just being a pleasant routine, it's also directly, mechanically producing the chemical and neurological shift your body needs to actually fall asleep. This is why consistency matters here more than perfection. You don't need an elaborate 20-pose sequence, and you don't need to hold each stretch until you're shaking. What you need is a short, repeatable pattern, 5, maybe 10 minutes. The same handful of gentle positions, performed slowly with attention paid to your breath, done at roughly the same point in your evening, night after night. Over time, this repetition does something powerful. It doesn't just produce a one-time mechanical and chemical shift each night. It builds a learned association so that the simple act of beginning your stretch routine starts to function as an advanced signal to your nervous system, priming the parasympathetic shift to begin even before the stretching itself has finished doing its physiological work. Your body starts recognizing the pattern itself as a cue, the same way it recognizes the dimming of lights or the sound of a closing door, which brings us back, finally, to where this all started, to that maddening, exhausting sensation of lying in bed, body worn out, mind unable to settle, sleep refusing to arrive no matter how badly you wanted it to. The mistake almost everyone makes in that moment is treating sleep like something they have to force, summon, or will into existence through sheer determination. But sleep was never something you needed to force. It's something your body does automatically, reliably, the moment the obstacles in its way are cleared. Those obstacles aren't mysterious. They're physical. They're the residual compression from a day spent fighting gravity, the elevated muscle tone keeping your sympathetic nervous system on alert, the shallow breathing that never gives your vagus nerve the chance to apply its brake, the cortisol still circulating because nothing has told your body the demands of the day are actually over. Stretching doesn't force sleep into existence. It removes one mechanical signal at a time, the very things that have been keeping sleep at bay. It tells your fascia the day's tension is no longer needed. It tells your mechanoreceptors there's nothing left to brace against. It tells your diaphragm it's safe to take a full breath again. It tells your vagus nerve it's time to apply the brake. And all of that together tells your nervous system something it's been waiting to hear since the moment you woke up that morning. The demands are finished, the threat has passed, and it's finally completely safe to let go.